I think we'll move on then to talking more about how we define social studies, what you feel is important to include in social studies. And that piece is interesting, I think, from a historical perspective to understand how the curriculum has been developed. But one of the things that I feel is most important about this book, or that I found really interesting, is first the idea of gatekeeping, and secondly, the idea of aims, or really teaching enduring understandings, the importance of teaching concepts as opposed to facts. Yeah.
It's the teacher who can create, because one thing I remember the curriculum is that the scholars, if you want, in academia, they approach a subject in a way that maybe it's not appropriate for middle school children. Mm-hmm. And so what he's saying is, the teacher has the ability to combine both, and you might look into a country maybe through the social education, but then end up asking them, to learn the geography and the history, and so that it's possible. I'll tell you, it takes a great teacher to do that.
I teach in his language. I teach both branches, the social disciplines and the civic education, but it's not in isolation. Mm-hmm. Like, it's not like we're going to now do civics and we're going to learn how to be good citizens, and then next month we're going to learn anthropology. Mm-hmm. Like, it's a survey. Still, it's very sequential, but within each unit, all of those disciplines and civic education is embodied. Mm-hmm. And then a lot of times, if you really think, schools are pretty much almost like the government in a sense. And every member in a school building has the same roles that we have in the bigger picture of society. So like the principal will be our president. And then like the children we have representatives for each homeroom. So they're part of like the Congress. And so we talk about how to come up with laws that are going to be for the people and made by the people. And then we teach them right from wrong, even with like little schoolyard conflicts. Mm-hmm. And conflict resolution is all the same thing with like our judicial system. So every day, it's just about the teachable moment. And you can be the dance teacher, you can be the math teacher, you can be the social studies teacher. Civic education comes to play every day in every classroom. Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. Okay, good. Are there any other comments on social studies? What would you include if you, and you do, several of you already teach social studies, so what do you include in your curriculum? Are there things, and you can talk about either textbooks that you use and how you add to those textbooks, or maybe you have a guide that you need to use, a textbook that you follow, and then there are things that you have developed to add to it, or places maybe where you feel that your textbook or your program is lacking and you wish that you had more of.
The curriculum is always going to be lacking. Mm-hmm. Because there's nothing that exists, and I don't think that no one can ever humanly possible create anything that will encompass everything and be perfect.
One book, right. You're saying, or one
There's
program that's going to have everything.
It's always going to be biased, and if you did, the book would be literally this big and no one would be able to carry it. So, like in my classroom, my 7th graders especially, they cover the first half of American history, which definitely is where civics comes into play, like the huge units of study on that. But, so they have their assigned textbook, and then we have a series of, I'm going to plug in a whole bunch of commercials right now. Joy Hakem, she writes The History of Us, or it's also could be read The History of the U.S. But that, I have a whole class series, it's very narrative. And then we also use sites like Teaching Matters and Facing History, which are all these different kinds of nonprofit organizations that create programs and supplemental materials to teach civics, to teach empathy, to teach, but use a surrounding different historical time periods, like for instance the Holocaust, which we don't definitely get into until 8th grade. But that's kind of like the different kinds of programs that we also use. I get a lot of stuff from the internet. Like we have programs like Mzuli Learning and Brain Pop, all these different kinds. My school definitely, like, we pay for these subscriptions, but we use a lot of multimedia to get a lot of primary sources like Eyes on the Prize to show, civics, to show, to show citizenship, to show where in history people's laws and people's rights were infringed, and what's put in place to protect those things, and sometimes how on paper it sounds right, and then in practice it doesn't work out that way, and why the Constitution is a living Constitution, and why it has to be amended and changed when we realize that people's rights are being infringed. So, we use tons of different kinds of things, and like you said, it is just work. It's a lot of planning, a lot of bags under your eyes, but that's what it is.
Yeah.
Like teaching, if you really break it down, it's into three parts. You have the planner, the implementer, and the assessor. And the biggest workload is in the planning stage. Because you have to not only plan your lesson, but you also have to prepare, plan B and plan C for the child that didn't get it, the child that doesn't speak English really, or the child that doesn't know how to read at that grade level. Or the child that's like zooming with it and now he's bored and
Not
throwing hands
challenged.
across the room. So you really, that's where the bulk of the work comes from.